You think $250,000 means financial security? But here's what the government doesn't want you to know. Inflation is silently destroying your wealth faster than you can earn it. And most people won't realize they've been robbed until it's too late. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through these economic principles that separate those who build lasting wealth from those who watch their purchasing power evaporate. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll discover the specific strategies that protect your financial future, regardless of what politicians do to the money supply. So, before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because understanding these principles could be the difference between prosperity and watching your life savings become worthless. The hidden tax that's stealing your future while you sleep. Let me tell you something that will fundamentally change how you think about money, security, and everything you've been taught about saving for your future. I spent decades studying monetary policy, and what I discovered should concern every single person who works hard, saves diligently, and believes they're building financial security. Are you worried that despite doing everything right, working overtime, cutting expenses, putting money away every month, you're somehow falling further behind financially? Let me explain why that feeling isn't paranoia. It's reality, and it's by design. When I was analyzing economic data in the 1960s and 1970s, I witnessed something that horrified me as an economist and as someone who cares deeply about individual freedom. I watched as inflation, that seemingly abstract economic concept, systematically destroyed the purchasing power of American families who had done everything society told them to do. They saved their money, they worked hard, they played by the rules, and they were punished for it. Not through taxation they could see on their paychecks, but through a hidden tax that operates in the shadows, stealing wealth so gradually that most people don't notice until entire decades of savings have evaporated. Here's what I need you to understand. Inflation is not a natural phenomenon. It's not something that just happens, like weather or seasons. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. What does that mean in plain English? It means inflation is caused by one thing and one thing only: too much money chasing too few goods. And who controls the money supply? The government and the central bank. Every time they print more money, every time they expand credit beyond what the economy can naturally support, they're diluting the value of every dollar you've earned and saved. Let me give you a concrete example that brings this home. In 1970, the median home price in America was around $23,000. Today, that same home costs over $300,000. Did houses suddenly become 13 times more valuable? Did the materials get 13 times better? Did construction techniques improve 13-fold? No. What changed was the purchasing power of the dollar. The house stayed the same. The dollar was destroyed. And if you had $250,000 saved in 1970 and just held it as cash, by 2000, that money had lost over 80% of its purchasing power. You'd need over $700,000 just to have the same buying power you started with. Think about what this means for your retirement planning, for everything you're working toward. You're told to save for 30 years, to build up that nest egg, to reach that magical number that represents security. But while you're accumulating dollars, the government is systematically reducing what those dollars can buy. It's the most insidious form of theft because it's invisible, it's gradual, and when people complain about it, politicians blame businesses, blame foreign countries, blame anything except their own policies. This is why I spent so much of my career warning people about the dangers of allowing government to manipulate the money supply. Because when government controls money, it controls you. Why traditional financial advice will leave you broke and broken now. Here's where this gets even more concerning. And I need you to pay very close attention, because this is where most people make the critical mistake that costs them their financial future. The conventional wisdom: save your money in a bank account, put it in safe government bonds, keep it in cash for emergencies. This advice made sense in a world with sound money. But we don't live in that world anymore. We haven't lived in that world since 1971, when President Nixon completely severed the dollar's connection to gold. From that moment forward, there were no constraints on money creation. The dollar became nothing more than pieces of paper backed by political promises. Are you frustrated that despite following all the expert advice about diversification, long-term investing, and staying the course, your financial situation feels increasingly precarious? Here's why. The entire financial advisory industry operates on assumptions that no longer match economic reality. They tell you to save 10% of your income. They tell you that compound interest will make you wealthy over time. They show you charts and calculations that look impressive on paper, but here's what they're not calculating: the compound destruction of your purchasing power happening simultaneously. Let me walk you through what I observed during my years studying this phenomenon. When I analyzed savings patterns and inflation rates from 1960 through 1980, I found something striking. People who followed conventional advice and kept significant portions of their wealth in savings accounts and government bonds actually became poorer over time, even though their account balances grew. A family that saved $100,000 by 1970 and kept it in a savings account earning 5% interest would have $432,000 by 1990. Sounds great, right? Except inflation averaged over 7% during that period. In real purchasing power, they didn't gain $332,000. They lost over 40% of their wealth. They worked, they saved, they did everything right, and they ended up significantly poorer because they didn't understand what was happening to their money. This is what infuriates me about modern economic policy. Politicians and central bankers will stand up and tell you they're fighting inflation, that they're protecting your interest, that they're managing the economy for your benefit. But look at what they actually do. They expand the money supply by trillions of dollars. They suppress interest rates below the rate of inflation, effectively forcing savers to lose money. They call this economic stimulus when it's really wealth transfer from people who save to people who borrow, from the middle class to the government and financial institutions. The financial establishment doesn't want you to understand this because the current system benefits them tremendously. Banks make enormous profits when they can borrow at near zero interest rates and lend at higher rates. The government gets to spend far more than it collects in taxes by simply printing the difference. Wall Street benefits from the asset bubbles created by cheap money flooding into stocks and real estate. Who loses? You do. The person working 40, 50, 60 hours a week trying to build something for their family, trying to achieve financial security. Your labor, your savings, your future, it's all being systematically transferred away through monetary manipulation. I want you to understand something crucial here. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is basic economics. This is mathematical reality. When the money supply grows faster than the economy's productive capacity, prices must rise. When interest rates are held artificially low, savers are punished and speculation is encouraged. When government can print money to pay its bills, there's no incentive for fiscal responsibility. These aren't opinions. These are economic laws as real as gravity. And just like ignoring gravity will hurt you, ignoring these economic realities will destroy your financial future. The only protection strategy that actually works when money dies. So what do? How do you protect yourself and your family when the very foundation of economic security, stable money, has been undermined? This is the most important section of everything we're discussing today, because understanding the problem without knowing the solution just creates anxiety and hopelessness. And I don't want that for you. I want you to feel empowered, to understand that there are concrete steps you can take regardless of what politicians or central bankers decide to do next. First and most fundamentally, you must understand this principle. In an inflationary environment, holding cash is the worst thing you can do. Cash guarantees you will lose purchasing power. Every year you hold significant amounts of cash during inflationary periods, you're volunteering to become poorer. This goes against every instinct we have about safety and liquidity, but it's absolutely true. The safety of cash is an illusion when that cash is being debased. So what actually preserves wealth when currency is being destroyed? The answer isn't complicated, but it requires you to think differently about what money really is. Money is supposed to be three things: a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. Modern fiat currency still functions as a medium of exchange and unit of account, but it has completely failed as a store of value. So you need to convert your wealth into assets that actually maintain their value over time. Real assets. That's the answer. Not paper promises, not government bonds, not cash stuffed under your mattress. Real, tangible assets that have intrinsic value, independent of what any government or central bank decides to do. Throughout history, whenever currencies have failed, and they always eventually fail, the people who preserved their wealth were those who held real assets. Let me be specific about what I mean, because this is where theory meets practical action you can take today. Real estate has historically been one of the most reliable inflation hedges, not because real estate itself becomes more valuable, but because land and property maintain their relative value even as currency degrades. A house that could be purchased for $20,000 in 1970 now costs $300,000, not because the house changed, but because the dollar changed. If you owned that house, your wealth was protected. If you held $20,000 in cash, your wealth was destroyed. During the 1970s, when inflation was running at 10% or more annually, real estate owners saw their net worth explode while savers watched their purchasing power collapse. This isn't speculation. This is what happened. Productive assets are another critical category. Businesses that produce real goods and services. Stocks in companies that can raise their prices as inflation rises. Equipment and machinery that generates income. These assets maintain value because they're connected to real economic activity. When I analyzed wealth preservation during inflationary periods, I consistently found that business owners and equity holders fared far better than bondholders and savers. Why? Because businesses can adjust. They can raise prices. They can adapt to changing economic conditions. A bond pays you fixed dollars that become worth less and less. A business pays you profits that adjust with inflation. Commodities are another area to understand. When paper currency becomes questionable, people return to hard assets. Gold, silver, oil, agricultural products. These have intrinsic value that doesn't depend on any government's promises. I'm not telling you to convert everything to gold bars and bury them in your backyard. But understanding that precious metals have served as money for thousands of years precisely because they can't be printed by politicians is important. In the 1970s, gold went from $35 per ounce to over $800 per ounce. That wasn't gold becoming more valuable. That was the dollar becoming less valuable and people recognizing it. But here's something equally important that most people miss. Your human capital is your most valuable asset. And it's also inflation protected if you use it correctly. Your skills, your knowledge, your ability to produce value, these can't be inflated away. If you're a skilled professional, craftsman, entrepreneur, or expert in any field, your ability to command higher wages or prices for your services adjusts with inflation. A doctor who earned $50,000 in 1970 might earn $300,000 today. The relative value of medical skills didn't change. The dollar changed. This is why I always emphasize that investment in education, skills, and own productive capacity is one of the best hedges against inflation. The government can print more dollars, but they can't print more of you. Now, let me address the question some of you are asking, but Milton, what if I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in real estate or start businesses? What if I'm just trying to survive and maybe save a few $100s a month? This is a crucial question because economic wisdom must be accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. Here's what you need to know. The principles I'm describing scale to any level of wealth, even if you're just starting out, even if you're living paycheck to paycheck. Understanding these principles changes your decision-making in ways that compound over time. If you're saving $200 a month, and putting it in a savings account earning 2% while inflation runs at 5%, you're losing purchasing power every single month. Instead, if you put that $200 into a low-cost index fund of stocks representing real businesses, you're likely to at least keep pace with inflation over time and probably exceed it. If you invest in your own education or skills that increase your earning power by even 10%, that's far more valuable than any return you'll get from a bank account. If you buy tools, equipment, or resources that let you start a side business or increase your productivity, you're creating inflation-protected value. The key is to shift your mindset from saving dollars to building wealth. Dollars are just a tool, a medium of exchange. Wealth is the real goods, real services, real productive capacity, and real assets that improve your life. When you save dollars during inflationary times, you're not actually building wealth. You're storing your labor in a melting ice cube. When you convert those dollars into real assets as quickly as possible, you're preserving the value of your work. Let me also address the risk question, because I know some of you are thinking, but isn't investing risky? Isn't it safer to just keep my money in the bank? Here's the truth that most financial advisors won't tell you clearly. In an inflationary environment, not investing is the riskiest thing you can do. You're guaranteed to lose purchasing power. You're choosing certain slow destruction over uncertain growth. Yes, markets fluctuate. Yes, real estate can have down periods. Yes, businesses can fail. But these risks are manageable, diversifiable, and historically have been far less damaging than the absolute certainty of inflation destroying your savings. During the 1970s and early 1980s, when I was most actively warning about these issues, people who kept their money safe in banks and bonds lost decades of purchasing power. People who took what seemed like risks by buying homes, investing in businesses, and holding equity positions maintained and grew their real wealth. The definition of risk changes completely when you understand what's happening to the money itself. It's not risky to buy real assets during inflation. It's insurance. It's protection. It's the rational response to an irrational monetary policy. Now, let me bring this all together because we've covered a lot of ground, and I want to make sure you understand exactly what to do with this information. First, accept this reality. The dollar is being systematically devalued. Inflation is not temporary or transitory, and this process will continue as long as governments can benefit from it. This isn't pessimism, it's realism based on decades of studying monetary history. Second, understand that your financial strategy must adapt to this reality. The rules that worked in an era of sound money don't work in an era of fiat currency manipulation. Third, take action based on these principles. Scale to whatever level of resources you currently have. Minimize your cash holdings to what you need for immediate expenses and emergencies. Convert excess savings into real assets as quickly as you can. Invest in your own skills and earning power, because human capital is inflation-proof. Buy real estate if you can, even if it's just a small property or a REIT, if direct ownership isn't possible. Hold equity positions in productive businesses through stocks or direct ownership. Consider some commodity exposure, particularly precious metals, as insurance. Always think in terms of purchasing power and real value, not nominal dollar amounts. Here's my final and most important message to you. Freedom and prosperity are inseparable from sound money, and when money becomes unsound, you must become more sophisticated to protect yourself. The generation that lived through the Great Depression understood these lessons viscerally. They saw what happened when monetary systems failed. Many of you haven't experienced real inflation yet, haven't seen what 10% or 15% annual currency debasement does to a society. But it's coming, and when it arrives, the people who prepared will maintain their standard of living, while those who trusted government promises will be devastated. You have the knowledge now. You understand what inflation really is, why traditional advice fails during inflationary periods, and what actually protects wealth when currency is being destroyed. The question is, will you act on this knowledge, or will you continue doing what everyone else does and hope for different results? I've seen both paths play out thousands of times over my decades of studying economics. I know which one leads to prosperity and which one leads to disappointment and desperation. Take action today, not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel more comfortable or have more money. Today, review your financial situation. Calculate how much purchasing power you're losing by holding cash. Make a plan to convert that cash into real assets systematically. Invest in your skills. Start that business you've been thinking about. Buy that property, open that brokerage account, and start buying productive assets. Whatever your situation, there are concrete steps you can take right now that will position you to not just survive, but thrive regardless of what happens to the dollar. And as you do this, remember why it matters. This isn't just about numbers in a bank account. It's about your ability to provide for your family, to retire with dignity, to have choices and freedom in your life. When government controls and manipulates money, they control and manipulate your future. When you understand these principles and act on them, you take back control. You protect what you've earned. You build real security that can't be printed away or taxed into oblivion. So take action. Protect yourself. Build real wealth, not nominal wealth. And whatever you do, don't trust politicians who tell you they're fighting inflation while simultaneously causing it. Trust economic reality. Trust the lessons of history. Trust your own judgment when you understand these fundamental principles. Because $250,000 in a bank account won't save you, but $250,000 worth of real assets, real skills, and real productive capacity absolutely can. The choice is yours, and the time to choose is now. Now, go out there and tell me in the comments, what's the first action you're going to take to protect your financial future? I want to hear from you, because your success is what this is all about.